On New Year's Eve, my son raised a glass of 12-year-old scotch in my dining room and said, "To Dad's health." I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because 3 weeks earlier, he had tried to convince a private physician that I didn't have any. I'm 72 years old. I live in Westchester County, New York, in the same 6,800 square foot colonial house my late wife and I bought in 1989 for $640,000. It's worth just over $5 million now, according to the quiet appraisal that landed in my mailbox without my request. That was the first thing that felt wrong. The second was when my housekeeper of 23 years, Elena, knocked on my study door at 6:15 a.m. on a Tuesday and closed it behind her. Elena doesn't close doors unless something is broken or someone is dying. She stood there holding her phone like it was radioactive. "Mr. Whitaker," she said softly, "I think your son is trying to sell your house."
Ist daher.
Then I snorted. Actually snorted. Like an old man in a bad sitcom. "My son can't sell my house," I said. "I'm still in it." She didn't smile. "He met with 2 men last Thursday. Real estate investors. I heard them in the kitchen. They were talking about liquidating before Q1 and medical declaration. Medical declaration. That phrase sat in my chest like ice. My son, Daniel, is 44. MBA from Wharton. Founder of a logistics tech company that had once been valued at $120 million. Polished. Charismatic. Always in a navy suit even at family barbecues. He also hasn't hugged me properly since my wife's funeral 4 years ago. "Elena?" I said carefully. "Did you misunderstand?" She shook her head. Then she showed me a photo she'd taken discreetly from the hallway. Daniel standing in my kitchen with 2 men in gray coats. Papers on the counter. A folder labeled, "Property Transfer, Whitaker Estate." My name. My house. My stomach turned. That was the first crack in the glass. The second crack came later that week. I had a cardiology appointment scheduled for 10:30 a.m. Thursday. I've had the same cardiologist for 8 years. Dr. Harris. Good man. Direct. Doesn't sugarcoat cholesterol numbers. At 9:45 a.m., I was dressed and ready. At 9:50, I realized my car keys were missing. I keep them in a bowl by the foyer table. Same place for a decade. Gone. I called Daniel because he'd visited the night before. "Dad," he answered, voice tight. "You canceled that appointment. We talked about this." "No, we didn't. You said you were tired of doctors. You've been confused lately." Confused. I remember the silence on the phone stretching like a wire. "I did not cancel," I said slowly. "Well," he replied, "someone did. The office called me. I'm your emergency contact." My emergency contact. I hung up and called Dr. Harris's office myself. "Yes, Mr. Whitaker," the receptionist said gently. "Your son called yesterday. He said you were having cognitive episodes and that he'd be overseeing your care going forward." Cognitive episodes. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat. I asked for the cancellation recording. They wouldn't release it without paperwork. Paperwork. That word would become very important. That afternoon, Elena found my keys. In the laundry room. Inside a detergent box. I don't do laundry. I stood there holding those keys, and for the first time in my life, I felt something I had never associated with my own child. Fear. Not of him physically, but of what he was capable of. That night, I couldn't sleep. I replayed the past 3 months like security footage. The medication changes. The new private Dr. Daniel insisted I see. The pill bottle that made me groggy in the afternoons. The time Daniel laughed when I forgot a word mid-sentence. "You're getting old, Dad," he had said lightly. It happens. But I hadn't been forgetting things before. And I am many things. Stubborn. Opinionated. Occasionally cranky. But not confused. The third crack came 5 days later. An envelope arrived by certified mail. Inside was a document draft titled, "Petition for Appointment of Conservator. Petitioner, Daniel Whitaker. Grounds, suspected dementia, impaired executive function, inability to manage financial assets estimated at $7.4 million. I read it twice. then 3 times. My hands were steady. My breathing was not. He wasn't just trying to sell my house. He was trying to declare me legally incapacitated. And if that petition went through, he would control everything. My home, my accounts, my wife's art collection, the scholarship fund she'd wanted to start but never did. $5 million in property equity. Gone. Because his company, as I would later discover, was hemorrhaging cash and facing a $4.8 million debt call by February 15th. I didn't know that number yet, but I knew this. My son was preparing to bury me while I was still alive. And the worst part? He was smiling at Sunday dinner while doing it. That Sunday, he came over with his wife, Marissa. She kissed my cheek. He poured me wine. "Dad," he said casually, "have you thought about downsizing? This house is a lot." "Is it?" I asked. "You seem overwhelmed lately." There it was again. Overwhelmed, confused, tired, a narrative forming around me like fog. I looked at my son, this man I had taught to ride a bicycle on the driveway out front, and for the first time I saw calculation behind his eyes. Not concern. Strategy. And I realized something cold and sharp. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a plan. I excused myself early that night and went upstairs to my study. I locked the door, and I called my daughter, because if Daniel thought I was too confused to fight back, he had badly underestimated the man who built this house. When I called my daughter, Rebecca, it was 10:47 p.m. She answered on the second ring. "Dad? Are you okay?" Rebecca is 38. Public interest attorney. Lives in Boston. Practical. Calm. The kind of woman who reads contracts for fun and once returned a car because the dealership tried to slip in a $495 documentation convenience fee. She is not dramatic. I told her everything. The missing keys. The canceled appointments. The conservatorship petition. The appraisal. Silence on the line for a full 5 seconds. Then she said, very quietly, "Dad, this is elder abuse. Hearing your own child use those words about her brother is like swallowing glass." "I don't want to overreact," I said. "You're not," she replied. "This is deliberate. He's building a record to show you're incompetent." There it was again. Incompetent. Rebecca asked me one question that shifted everything. "Do you feel confused?"
No.
"Have you had memory lapses outside normal aging?"
No.
"Have you signed anything recently you didn't understand?" I paused. 2 weeks earlier, Daniel had brought over a healthcare coordination form. He said it would make appointments easier. I hadn't read it carefully. My stomach dropped. Rebecca didn't panic. She switched into lawyer mode. "Okay," she said. "We're not confronting him. Not yet. First, we gather evidence." That was the moment I stopped being a target and started being a witness. The next morning, Rebecca called a private physician she trusted, Dr. Michael Lang, a geriatric specialist in Manhattan. I saw him 2 days later. I brought every pill bottle in a grocery bag. Dr. Lang examined them carefully. "Who prescribed this?" he asked, holding up one bottle. It was a sedative. Low dose, but enough to cause fogginess. "The Dr. Daniel recommended," I said.
Dr. Lang frownet.
"This combination would absolutely cause confusion in someone your age." He ran cognitive tests, memory recall, pattern recognition, executive function exercises. I scored well above average for my age group. "Mr. Whitaker," he said plainly, "you do not have dementia." I almost laughed out of relief. Instead, I felt something colder. That medication had been prescribed after a single 15-minute consultation arranged by my son. Dr. Lang documented everything. We had our first piece of hard evidence. Rebecca hired a forensic accountant, an old colleague named Marcus Hill. Within 10 days, Marcus found what Daniel hoped no one would look for. His company was collapsing. Revenue had dropped 42% in 2 quarters. 3 major investors had pulled out. There was a $4.8 million margin call due February 15th. If he couldn't cover it, bankruptcy was inevitable. Marcus sent us a short summary. Daniel needed liquidity.
Fast.
My house, valued at $5 million, each time citing cognitive decline or episodes. There were 5 cancellations over 3 months. I had only known about one. He had been building a paper trail. Quietly, methodically, Elena became the unlikely hero of this story. She admitted something that made me blink. I installed small cameras in the hallway last year, she said softly. After the break-in down the street. I had forgotten. She showed me footage from 2 weeks earlier. Daniel entering the foyer alone, picking up my keys, walking toward the laundry room, coming back empty-handed. Clear as day. I stared at the screen. My son, hiding my keys, like a teenager sneaking out. Except this wasn't curfew. This was a legal coup. I exhaled slowly. Rebecca squeezed my hand. Now we plan, she said. The conservatorship petition had not yet been filed, just drafted. Rebecca contacted a senior partner at her firm who specialized in elder law. We prepared a countermeasure. A full independent medical evaluation, already done. Affidavits from Dr. Lang. Financial capacity assessments. A notarized statement from me revoking any healthcare coordination Daniel claimed. A formal letter warning of criminal liability for fraudulent conservatorship filings. We were building something Daniel didn't expect. A wall. I would like to tell you I was purely strategic. Calm. Cold. That's not true. At 3 a.m., I lay awake thinking about Daniel at 8 years old, building Lego towers in this same house. At 16, asking me for advice about college. At 25, proud in his graduation cap. Where had it shifted? Was it greed? Was it fear? Or had I simply refused to see who he'd become? Betrayal by a stranger is anger. Betrayal by your child is grief. And grief makes you weak if you let it. I did not let it. Rebecca proposed something bold. Don't stop him, she said. Let him think it's working. I raised an eyebrow. She smiled slightly. We collect everything. Then we confront him when he least expects it. When? She glanced at the calendar. New Year's Eve. I almost snorted again. Very theatrical, I said. Very effective, she replied. Daniel and Marissa had already planned to host dinner at my house that night. A fresh start celebration, he called it. I agreed enthusiastically, played slightly forgetful. Once or twice, I pretended to search for words I didn't need help finding. Daniel looked relieved, which told me everything. By December 28th, we had medical clearance proving full cognitive health, documentation of medication manipulation, financial records showing motive, video evidence of tampering, phone logs of fraudulent cancellations, a draft letter from our attorney prepared for immediate delivery, and a revised will removing Daniel as primary heir. Yes, I changed my will. I did it calmly. I did it legally. And I slept better that night than I had in months. Because revenge is not shouting. It is preparation. On December 31st at 7 p.m., Daniel arrived with champagne. He kissed my cheek. Dad, he said warmly, you look good. I feel good, I replied. And I meant it. Because he had no idea what midnight would bring. Do you want me to continue to the next section? New Year's Eve has always been my wife's favorite holiday. She liked clean slates, fresh calendars, symbolic endings. So when Daniel suggested we host dinner at my house this year, I agreed without hesitation. He thought he was walking into a celebration. He was walking into a courtroom. Dinner began at 7:15 p.m. The table was set with my wife's china, crystal glasses. Elena had made prime rib. Marissa brought a flourless chocolate cake and kissed my cheek like we were still a family untouched by rot. Daniel was in a navy suit, confident, relaxed, a man who believed the pieces were already falling into place. I watched him laugh, watched him refill my wine glass. Easy there, Dad, he said lightly when I took a second sip. Don't want you dizzy. I smiled. Inside, something hardened. At 9:40 p.m., Rebecca arrived. Daniel looked surprised. Oh, he said, didn't know you were coming. I was invited, she replied evenly. She hugged me a second longer than usual. That was our signal. Everything was ready. In my study upstairs, a folder containing Dr. Lang's full medical evaluation. Copies of Daniel's call logs canceling my appointments. The security footage screenshots. The forensic accountant's summary of his company's $4.8 million margin call. The draft conservatorship petition. And a letter from our attorney warning of criminal charges for elder abuse and fraud. Plus one more document. My new will. Signed. Notarized. Filed. At 11:55 p.m., Daniel stood and raised a glass. To 2026, he said. To new beginnings. And to Dad's health. There it was again. Health. Rebecca and I exchanged a glance. I stood up slowly. Before midnight, I said calmly, I'd like to make a toast of my own. Daniel smiled. Of course. I lifted my glass. To clarity. He laughed lightly. I'll drink to that. Good, I said, because we're about to need it. The room shifted. Marissa stopped smiling. Rebecca walked quietly to the hallway and returned with the folder. Daniel frowned. What's this? Evidence, I said simply. I didn't shout. I didn't accuse. I narrated, like a board meeting. 3 months ago, I began. My medical appointments began getting canceled without my knowledge. Daniel shifted in his chair. I slid a paper across the table. Phone logs. His number. 5 cancellations. Each cancellation cited cognitive decline. He opened his mouth. I continued. 2 months ago, a private doctor you recommended prescribed medication that causes sedation and confusion in elderly patients. I handed him Dr. Lang's report. Independent evaluation shows I do not have dementia. His jaw tightened. Marissa whispered, Daniel, 1 month ago, I said. My house keys disappeared and were found hidden in a detergent box. I placed printed stills from the hallway camera on the table. There he was, caught. Even at a grainy angle, it was unmistakable. His face drained of color. You installed cameras? He snapped. No, I said evenly. Elena did. His eyes flickered toward the kitchen. Elena stood there quietly, arms crossed. Loyalty looks different when it isn't for sale. I continued. 2 weeks ago, a draft petition was prepared to declare me legally incapacitated. Rebecca placed the document in front of him. Petitioner, Daniel Whitaker. Grounds, suspected dementia. He swallowed. That wasn't filed, he said weakly. Yet, Rebecca replied. Then I delivered the part that changed the temperature in the room. I understand your company owes $4.8 million by February 15th. Silence. Real silence. Marissa's eyes widened. What? She whispered. Daniel stared at me. How do you? Forensic accountants are very thorough, Rebecca said softly. I leaned forward. You needed liquidity. My house is worth $5 million. Convenient. He looked like a man watching a bridge collapse under his feet. You don't understand, he said, voice cracking slightly. I was protecting you. The market is unstable. This house is a liability. Stop, I said quietly, not angry, just finished. You were not protecting me. You were liquidating me. That landed. He ran a hand through his hair. I was going to tell you. When? I asked. No answer. Midnight fireworks began outside. Distant pops in the cold air. Inside my dining room, something else detonated. Daniel tried one last pivot. You can't prove intent, he said, almost desperate. This is circumstantial. Rebecca slid one final envelope toward him. Our attorney is prepared to file criminal charges for attempted fraudulent conservatorship and elder abuse if you proceed. His face went pale. Marissa looked between us like she'd just realized she married a stranger. You'd send your own son to jail? He asked. I held his gaze. No, I said calmly. You would. That was the reversal. He had expected confusion. He found preparation. He had expected weakness. He found documentation. And he had expected silence. Instead, he found a father who had finally stopped protecting him from consequences. There's one more thing, I said. I handed him the last document. My will has been revised. He stared at it. You've been removed as primary heir. The evidence wasn't emotional. It was structured, organized, cold. He pushed his chair back abruptly. This isn't over, he muttered. I met his eyes. It is, I said. He left without hugging me, without saying Happy New Year. The front door closed with a finality I felt in my bones. I stood there for a long moment. Then I exhaled. Not victory, not joy, just release. Rebecca squeezed my shoulder. You okay? She asked. I surprised myself by laughing softly. Apparently, I said, I'm very cognitively capable. She snorted, and for the first time in months, I felt fully in control of my own life again. The morning after New Year's Eve, my house was quiet. Too quiet. No clinking dishes. No tense footsteps. No performance of family normalcy. Just sunlight through the dining room windows and the faint smell of leftover prime rib. I sat at the same table where, 12 hours earlier, my son's plan had collapsed. I expected to feel triumphant. Instead, I felt tired. Not physically, emotionally, because justice is clean on paper, but messy in blood. Our attorney sent the formal warning letter on January 2nd. It was not theatrical. It was precise. It outlined evidence of medication manipulation, documentation of fraudulent medical appointment cancellations, video proof of interference with personal property, intent to pursue criminal charges if any conservatorship petition was filed. Notice that my will had been lawfully amended. The letter used phrases like fiduciary exploitation, coercive control, and elder abuse statutes under New York Penal Law Section 260.32. Cold language. Heavy consequences. Daniel did not respond directly. Instead, his attorney requested a family mediation. We declined. This was no longer a misunderstanding. It was a documented attempt at financial seizure. By January 28th, the news became public. Daniel's company filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. I didn't gloat. I didn't call him. I simply read the article online and closed my laptop. The margin call had been real. Investors had withdrawn. Without my house as collateral, there was no miracle bailout. For a brief moment, I wondered, if I had simply written him a check, would this have ended differently? But then I remembered the draft petition. The false dementia narrative. The hidden keys. He hadn't asked for help. He had tried to remove my rights. That difference matters. In February, Marissa called me. Her voice was thin. I didn't know, she said immediately. I believed her. She told me Daniel had never mentioned debt. Never mentioned the petition. She had thought he was streamlining family assets. She used that phrase twice. Streamlining. As if I were outdated software. She filed for divorce in March. I did not celebrate that either. Families collapsing rarely feel like victories. Daniel did not contact me for nearly 6 weeks. Then one afternoon in mid-March, my phone rang. I recognized the number. I let it ring twice before answering. Dad. His voice sounded different. Less polished. Smaller. We met 3 days later at a quiet coffee shop in White Plains. No suites. No investors. Just 2 men and a history neither knew how to carry. He didn't start with excuses. That surprised me. I panicked, he said plainly. I thought if the company failed, everything I built would be gone. It was already gone, I replied. He nodded. I convinced myself you didn't need this house, that you'd be safer under supervision. I looked at him carefully. Supervision, I repeated. He winced. I told myself it wasn't stealing if it was for family. There it was. Rationalization exposed. You were going to declare me incompetent, I said quietly. He didn't deny it. Tears formed in his eyes before he blinked them away. I'm sorry, he said. Not defensive. Not strategic. Just sorry. And here is the complicated truth. I believe that too. But apology does not erase intent. I won't press charges, I said calmly. But you will not control any part of my life again. He nodded. I understand. I paid for my own coffee. That detail mattered to me. Without the company, without the marriage, without investor status. Daniel was just a man who had gambled and lost. Friends distanced themselves. Former partners pursued civil claims. His lifestyle shrank quickly. I did not contribute financially. That was not revenge. That was boundary. He had tried to take my independence. I would not subsidize the lesson he refused to learn. Meanwhile, my life grew steadier. I reinstated my medical appointments, stopped the sedative permanently. My mind felt sharper within weeks. Funny how clarity returns when no one is trying to manufacture confusion. I installed additional security systems, my idea this time, not out of paranoia, out of principle. Control over one's environment is dignity. Rebecca began visiting more often, not because she had to, because she wanted to. We talked about things beyond crisis, books, politics, my late wife's garden. For the first time in years, our conversations were not overshadowed by Daniel's orbit. And Elena, I gave her a raise. She refused at first. I insisted. Loyalty deserves acknowledgement, not just gratitude. In April, I finalized something my wife had once dreamed about. A scholarship fund focused on elder justice advocacy, named after Rebecca, because she fought when I couldn't see clearly what was happening. The fund began with $1.2 million, structured legally, protected. Ironically, the very estate planning Daniel had tried to exploit ensured its stability. Sometimes the best revenge is redirection, not destruction. People assume after a confrontation like that, everything feels resolved. It doesn't. There are mornings I wake up and replay that dinner in my mind. His face when he realized. The split second where he looked like the boy I raised, and the man who betrayed me. At the same time, that dual image stays with you. But here's what doesn't stay. Fear. That's gone. Because once manipulation is exposed, it loses oxygen. And once you reclaim your agency, you stop waiting for someone else to define you. There's a strange quiet that comes after betrayal. Not silence, but recalibration. The house feels different now. Not because anything changed physically. Same hardwood floors, same staircase my wife used to decorate with garlands every December. But because the air no longer carries doubt. I walk through my own front door without wondering who is building a case against me behind my back. That's a kind of wealth no appraisal can measure. I used to believe love within a family was automatic protection. It isn't. Love without boundaries becomes vulnerability. And vulnerability in the wrong hands becomes leverage. My mistake wasn't trusting my son. It was ignoring small discomforts because I didn't want conflict. The canceled appointments. The subtle comments about confusion. The medication that made afternoons blurry. I brushed it aside because confronting it meant acknowledging something uglier. But here's the philosophical part one didn't understand at 72. Denial is not kindness. It's surrender. When someone begins rewriting your reality, the worst thing you can do is argue emotionally. The best thing you can do is document. Facts do not get gaslit. Paper trails do not care about manipulation. That was my turning point, from passive father to strategic witness. I didn't scream. I didn't disown him publicly. I didn't post dramatic statements online. I did something quieter. I removed his access. I revised my will. I reinforced my autonomy. I protected my future. There's a misconception that revenge must feel explosive. Mine felt administrative, almost boring. But boring wins in court. Boring protects assets. Boring preserves dignity. And dignity was what he tried to take. Not just money. Not just property. Dignity. The right to be believed in your own mind. The right to walk into a doctor's office without someone whispering confusion behind you. The right to age without being erased. Our relationship now is cautious. He visits occasionally. We speak plainly. No financial conversations. No paperwork crosses the table. He understands there is no second attempt. Trust, once weaponized, does not reset. He is rebuilding his life slowly. Smaller apartment. Consulting work. Less ego. More humility. I do not hate him. Hate is heavy. But I do not forget either. Forgiveness without memory invites repetition. Rebecca is now on the board of the school. Elena still closes my study door when she needs to tell me something serious. But now it's usually about plumbing, which is a far less dramatic conspiracy. I trust her with my home because she protected it when I couldn't see clearly. Loyalty revealed under pressure is the only kind that counts. If you're between 30 and 65 reading this, here's what I'll tell you. Independence isn't just for the young. It's not a phase you outgrow. It's a muscle. And if someone tries to convince you that you're too tired, too confused, too old to manage your own life, ask questions, check documents, call a second doctor, tell someone you trust. Because manipulation thrives in isolation. It shrivels under scrutiny. I was fortunate. I had a daughter who knew the law, a housekeeper who paid attention, an attorney who acted swiftly. But the real shift happened when I decided I was not going to fade quietly into someone else's narrative. On the anniversary of that New Year's Eve dinner, I poured myself a small glass of scotch. Same brand Daniel brought. I stood by the window and watched fireworks in the distance. And I made a different toast. Not to health. Not to new beginnings. To clarity. Because clarity saved me. And here is the truth no one likes to admit. Sometimes the most dangerous betrayal doesn't come from enemies. It comes from the people who believe your life is an asset to be managed. If you take anything from my story, let it be this. Protect your dignity like it's worth $5 million. Because it is. And the best revenge is waking up in your own house, in your own mind, with no one holding the keys but you.